Welcome to What the Hex, your source for Warhammer Underworlds, and under 30 new ways to play the official, unofficial Warhammer Underworlds format. I'm your host, Phil. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Davy. How you doing?
I'm good. Are we rivals too?
I think we're rivals, but in a very good-natured, like, I want to make you better kind of way.
Like Rivals Plus.
Yeah, Rivals Plus. If you couldn't guess, we're going to be talking a bit today about the new decks for the Rivals Plus / Warlords / name TBD format of Warhammer Underworlds. The Patient Lurkers and Vainglorious Raiders, which are both very like both those names are quite a mouthful. I feel like they could have come up with something a little easier, but either way, should be some interesting stuff to dive into there.
Yep.
But before we move on, just to give you a little bit of context about when we're recording, at this point, about a week ago, we had the skirmish game reveal show from Games Workshop.
Yeah.
So they showed us the models for the next warband, which was pretty cool. Like Witch Hunters, Hexbanes, something. I don't even remember. They got 2 dogs. That's the important thing.
I know. Everybody was excited about the dog they're going to get. And guess what? You got 2, folks.
Yeah. Oh. Hey, 2 dogs. Barely know anything about them yet. Won't speculate too much here. They do look very cool, although I'm a little confused about what their mechanics are going to look like. So I think at this point we have about 4 cards, so I think it's worth waiting to make any sort of judgment calls.
Yeah. Hexbane's Hunters is what it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Not terribly surprising.
Yeah, considering that seems that their mechanics revolve around hunters, which is a little strange given that we're sort of past the hunter thing, but no reason we couldn't continue that.
Yeah.
But that is for a future episode when we know a bit more. For today, we also have some pretty cool community shout outs. So to move things along, let's try and chew through these quickly. I will say as a quick shout out, as we've been saying now, just to make sure that people are aware, we are hosting a tournament coming up on August 7th. That is a Sunday. It will be at Noble Knight Games in Fitchburg, Wisconsin. We're playing championship format. If you are nearby or feel like traveling, come out and join us. We'll have a good time. Hopefully have close to 15 to 20 people. So reasonably sized, and it should just be a good time. So yeah.
Whatever number we end up with, I'm super excited to see people in person. And toss some dice out there again. So
absolutely.
I wanted to shout out Battle Mallet specifically because we had planned this episode, and I should have probably guessed, but since they are really great at covering the Rivals and Rivals Plus content, this very morning they dropped an episode on this same subject. But
of course,
I've been out at the beach with the kids, so I haven't had a chance to listen yet. So if we overlap on opinions, it's because great minds think alike, and not because I'm stealing their ideas. I swear.
yeah. Promise.
Yeah. Talk to my lawyer, Jason Murray. No, please don't.
No, the Mortal Realms podcast will not need to be involved in any sort of legal action. And so sort of tangential to some action that I saw you got up to this past weekend. Maybe you were brawling a little bit?
I was. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this event, but there is an online. Well, okay, so this is it. It's going through the Vassal Discord. Shuby's been a big hand on getting this to run. This is the Vassal Brawl. So this is they've been running some sort of online clashes. They're a 2-day thing, and it's been difficult to get attendance because you can understand it's a lot of time to be sitting in front of your computer. It was basically pretty unrealistic for me to do such a thing. Mm-hmm. And so Shuby had this brainchild of something called the Vassal Brawl, and the idea is that there are four different qualifiers. Well, let me give you two right from his words. We wanted to try and make a more accessible format while also keeping the competition more tense by adding a virtual day two. That's why we made it only 3 rounds for the qualifiers, together with a cap of 16 players, to make sure there's at least one clear winner, and if we were filling the cap, 2 clear winners. So if they have 16 players, you should end up with 2 undefeated players, and that's important because every ball has the 4 qualifiers and 1 invitational. Each of these qualifiers is a 3-round best-of-3 tournament, and the top 2 of every qualifier earns a spot in the invitational. So at the end of the day, the 2 top players, theoretically the 2 undefeated players, will then advance. So once you get to the top 2 from each of those 4 qualifiers, then the invitational is an 8-person best-of-3 knockout tournament. So you end up with effectively a day 2 is just spread out more, so it's more accessible. And then you can actually enter multiple times. If you don't qualify the first time around, you can try again the next time around. With the added benefit of whoever kicked your butt in the last one to get to the top, you won't have to face them the next time around. So, and I did participate. It was just this past Sunday. There's still 3 more. By the time you hear this, you'll still have time to get into any of those 3. That'd be July 30th, August 14th, or August 27th. So a little back and forth on Saturdays and Sundays there, depending on what might work for people. There's only this past weekend was the only one I was going to be able to go to because I will either be working or traveling on those other days. And so I was excited to just give it a try. I knew going in that I did not have the reps with the warband. I ended up taking the Cunning Crew just because that's what I've been playing lately. But I was like, look, I can hem and haw about like being the perfect amount of ready, or I can just do it and have fun. And I'm so glad I did. I had an absolute blast. Skylar from our local came along and played too. And I had the amazing experience of the first round mirror match, not just the mirror match, but against Chad, who has been playing Cunning Crew like since they were released and trying to become. So it was like me,
master.
yeah, me with my like hodgepodge, like still figuring it out deck against like a super refined and then super practiced person. And it was gruesome. It was amazing. It was really fun to watch somebody with that amount of experience. So I had that. I also say I played Sean and Mike, I believe, on the other. I know the handles more than I know the first names. But my other 2 opponents were Shadeborn, and learned a lot from those too. I'm excited to kind of talk to our locals and help them tweak their decks because we've got a few Shadeborn players, and there were some pretty impressive things, and there were some shockingly high glory totals. I was coming right off shift. I came directly from my 24-hour shift and jumped on, and I accidentally sent like an older iteration of the deck. So I was playing with like a really low glory ceiling that I thought at one point I thought might work, learned it wouldn't, and then accidentally played with that anyway. So
Oh no.
I'm convinced though, like the games I was in, it's not that I lost them by like 2, I lost them by a ton. So that was not the difference, but it was a little disappointing. I didn't quite stress test the ones I did. So
Yeah.
anyway, I had an amazing time at it, and I would really encourage people to check that out. And of course, come see us if you're local. In person, this is great. In person is great too. But the level of friendliness and the skill level was just awesome. And you can't get better unless you play against like the higher the level of competition you play against is the better you are for learning. And this is extremely high level, so you're gonna learn a lot.
Yeah.
So don't be scared. Go play.
Sure.
The worst that'll happen is that you played some Underworlds and had a good time.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about you,
All
Phil?
right.
Anything the heck's going on with you?
Well, yeah, so a little bit. So I actually went to sort of fill in. So we've been One of our locals, also Skylar, actually, has lately
What a
been
guy.
what a
Yeah.
guy, really taken up the mantle to help out our local community lately. Just doing a lot of stuff, actually. That could even be a community shout out, Skylar. You've been doing a ton to help out this community. I see you. I appreciate you. But so he's been trying to do a series of outreach events where he would go to the local game stores in our area. And while that may not sound like a lot, we have tons of game stores in our area, like a strange amount for the amount of people in
Yeah.
our urban area.
Yeah.
Um, I don't actually know the true count. I want to say that's close to 10, but I don't really know. But so he had one of these planned. I think it's actually a reschedule from one that basically got no attendance because of a really bad storm the same night. Just weird happenstance. So I was planning on going to that anyway. It turned out that he couldn't make it sort of on short notice. So I ended up showing up. Two of our other locals showed up. We taught a couple people how to play the game. It was just a good time. And I hope that we can keep doing that because it seemed like those folks were pretty interested. So always glad to get more people into the underworlds.
Yeah.
And then otherwise, I've just been monkeying around with some weird off the wall stuff, trying to find something that's maybe a little bit counter meta
Mm.
because the flip meta right now has been kind of driving me nuts. I tried playing as it, and the couple games where I was like sort of doing the thing where both sides have the same strategy, it just was like super stressful, and I felt like I ended up losing games because I didn't have power cards when my opponents had power cards, and it felt bad.
Mm.
Uh, so trying something different, trying something a little weird. I feel like I haven't had enough games with it yet to really know if it's working like because it's good or if it's working because it's just a surprise thing.
Well,
So maybe
yeah, I'd love to talk about this deck that you've cooked up in a future episode. So
yeah. So I think I'm gonna keep experimenting, and then we will maybe talk some more in the future. But
perfect.
there's a little teaser for folks. But let's get
uh,
on. Or no, you got something else?
no, go for it.
Okay. Well, I was thinking we've been going on a bit, but we came to talk about rivals.
Hmm.
So let's do it. We got two new decks released by Games Workshop officially. Um, so these, for folks, I guess, who don't know, there is, of course, the Rivals format where you just play out of the box with whatever faction deck comes with the warband. And then there's sort of the official, unofficial format where you supplement those cards with a number of cards from very specific sets of cards. So we actually have true Rivals decks that are released as card packs. The ones that currently exist are the Illusory Might and the older one, which is Silent Menace.
Yeah.
That was like forgetting the name, and then it came to me. Uh, and so in between those releases, they have also given us these new White Dwarf sort of lists of cards that are compiled from other card releases.
Mm.
And so we just got two more of those in the most recent White Dwarf. They've since been posted on the Rivals Rules download
Yeah.
on the Games Workshop page. So they are
We'll
accessible.
I'll try to remember to link it in the show notes, but all you have to do is go to Warhammer Community FAQs and then check out the Rivals format rules, and they're going to be in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Strangely enough, there is no actual explanation of what Rivals Plus is, yet those decks do exist there. So
Well, because they can be used just as straight
you can't.
Rivals, right? Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
They can be just used as straight Rivals. So I suppose it does make sense to just have them posted
Yeah.
there. A good thing to just start with is what do you think? Should like we got new Rivals decks, but they came out in a White Dwarf. What do you think of that? This is actually the second time that this has happened.
Yeah. So the second and third deck and the second occurrence, since these were simultaneously released.
Yeah.
So so here's the thing: like, the Rivals format, and then by extension, the Rivals Plus. Those are like stepping stones for new players, right? Like
Absolutely.
the idea with Rivals is that, man, if I have to like custom build a deck in order just to play this game, that's a big barrier. So the idea of Rivals, I can just assemble my models and be playing as quick as I can get them together and go, because I just pull the cards out and play it.
Yep.
And Rivals Plus is that stepping stone where, like, well, like I'd like to customize a bit, but I don't want to have to buy a ton of stuff, and so uh, salting in something else. So that's good. So the idea there is like, okay, like I already have my, I don't know, Starblood Stalkers. I'm going to pick up Essentials. Now I can do some more. And we've seen it, right? Like we've seen new
Yeah.
players uh, say like, that was fun. I can see I've got some bad cards or some cards that I don't like or don't fit my play style. How do I change those for something else? You say, oh, well, good question. Pick up one of these, and for us, it's been Silent Menace, Illusory Might, or Essentials. That's the easy stepping stone. This is a weird one because, and I'm going to call out Patient Lurkers specifically, because this is we'll call it a virtual Rivals deck.
Sure.
Uh, and the cards from that are from the Harrow Deep core set, the Nethermaze core set, Black Powder's Buccaneers expansion, Illusory Might Rivals deck, so they steals from another Rivals deck,
Yeah.
and the Exile Dead expansion. So
Yeah.
that's 5 different things, including 2 core sets, to be able to just have all the cards that are in this. So, not to take words out of your mouth, but you mentioned in passing, like, hey, this seems a little counterintuitive with the idea, like that the Patient Lurkers Rivals deck is not an easy pickup.
No, it's not. And it's really strange because compared to the other ones, it is like far and away more stuff. Both of the other ones, Maze Breachers and Vainglorious Raiders, are 2 things.
Yep.
Although we can say that Vainglorious Raiders is both of the core sets, so
Mm-hmm.
that is also a significant investment. Um, but Maze Breachers is the Harrow Deep core set and Black Powders.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of like if you're getting in Harrow Deep, which is when that came out, it sort of makes sense that it's like, hey, you've already got your warband.
Yeah.
Buy the core set so you have the rules and the boards and stuff, and then pick up one more thing, and you're sort of on your way. Which I guess, the next sort of step in that journey is that you're going to then buy Nethermaze and then the other things, but that sort of assumes that you're starting from already having bought like Harrow Deep, and I don't think that that's necessarily a safe assumption.
Mm-hmm.
So these are both a little strange, and I guess I have seen some people speculating online, just chatting to say like, why is this the way it is? Maybe it's sort of like we're trying to bring both new players in, but also trying to bring established players down to be like, hey, there's still more here for you, if like to entice you into this like middle ground format.
And that's it. I'm on board with that explanation.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense because you want to provide some variety, and it almost serves as like, hey, I started on Rivals. I did some Rivals Plus with Illusory Might or whatever, or Essentials. I'd kind of like to like play in this still somewhat fenced off area a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
And so this kind of gives you a roadmap. You're like, well, what if I unlock Vainglorious Raiders? Or what if I unlock Maze Breachers by getting these 2 things? Okay, well, now I'm some of the way towards Vainglorious Raiders. Okay, well, now I'm most of the way towards Patient Lurkers. Okay, now I've got them all. Well, maybe I'm ready for
Yeah.
Championship if I wasn't already. So I see it as kind of a learning ladder, and like you said, like a introduction of a little additional variety to keep those longtime players a little more engaged with the format, because you want these to be attended. And for example, our local, we had a good showing on just a Rivals Plus, and
Yeah.
if you can keep that format interesting to plenty of players, then you keep generating that energy. But I had one more thought about this, and I think I mentioned it being kind of like an advanced step along learning the format for players. I think it might be an advanced step towards learning the format for GW. So I think the game
Yeah,
designers, right? Because
sure.
um, we saw the very first Rivals, Universal Rivals deck, I should say, the very first Universal Rivals deck we saw was Silent Menace, which was in no way at all a functional deck, right?
No.
Like, just didn't. It had some stuff that was kind of themed, but it was just kind of a mess functionally. Illusory Might was definitely better. It still had some like ones that just didn't fit at all in there. I'm thinking
Yeah.
of what Bargain, Desperate Bargain, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, get your upgrades that you don't actually have in the deck. Sure, that
yeah,
makes
get them,
sense.
get them, get them for free when they're already free. Anyway, but there's a learning curve there. Like you could see some, them get a better idea of like maybe this is what we're trying for. So they can put these out and say, do these work? Is this a thing? Is this something
Mhm.
here? And then get a sense for as they decide how they are going to release the universals for the next season. All right, do I bundle these in with a warband, or do I make these standalone? Like, which of these seems to work as a rivals deck?
Mhm.
And I think that's great. Honestly, I think we want them to be able to kind of play around with it, learn. Doesn't cost them hardly anything to do this sort of thing. And if we get more as they come, then all the better for it. So
For sure. And I think while having the options for Rivals Plus is certainly important, I think also having more options for just plain Rivals is good too, because there
yeah,
are some Warbands Rivals decks that really don't function.
mm,
And that's certainly been getting a lot better. I
hmm
don't know that any of the new ones from Nether Maze uh, wouldn't function out of the box. I think they're all pretty good. Black powder though is like it's pretty rough if you have to just play them straight out of the box. So
yeah,
having more options for like your favorite faction is probably good, because I think, as we've mentioned plenty of times before, I think the models are one of the best selling points for the game.
hmm
Um, and it's a real downer to feel like you picked up the warband that you really love and you have the models that you think are really great, but you can't actually like make them work
yeah,
on the table.
yeah,
So I think that's also a plus.
sure,
But that's a lot of talk about sort of the pluses and minuses of the format and sort of how this actual release works, but we haven't even begun to talk about the actual decks.
mm.
Uh, so there are two of them. Where would you like to start, Davey?
Uh, I'm gonna ask you. So we split these up. We gave you the polysyllabic Vainglorious Raiders,
Yeah.
uh, and we said, all right, here's the deal. We're each gonna kind of look into these, and then we're gonna come up with some war bands that we think if I had to play this deck, what. And I looked at it more from a Rivals Plus. I don't know if you looked at it from both Rivals and Rivals Plus, but what
Yeah.
what warband do we think would kind of play along with this?
Yeah. So I definitely started by just looking at the deck as a standalone,
hmm
not really with any warband in mind. I just wanted to like just absorb it as like, okay, what is the deck trying to do?
Yeah.
Um, so starting with the objectives, it's got. I'll just run them down quick. These will be posted. These are available, so I'm not going to read off how they all work. I'm just going to read the names quickly just to try and get through them all. But it is Contest of Equals, Fallen Titan, Fearless Seekers, In Cold Blood, Brave Advance, Down with the Ship, Extraordinary Revelation, Lost Leader, Master the Abyss, Shadow Elimination, Shifting Walls, and Sudden Revelation.
Mm.
So we got a number of things for holding in enemy territory. We've got a number of things that care about flipping tokens. So automatically, we're kind of seeing like, okay, positioning is important. The deck definitely wants you to be in enemy territory, so you need to
Yeah.
be either kind of aggressive or you need to have some way to sort of prevent just getting blown out once you're in enemy territory.
Mm-hmm.
But then it sort of has these other pieces that care about killing stuff. So it's sort of like, it feels like it's trying to push you towards this sort of invasion aggro flex thing,
Yeah.
um, which I think works for a number of different warbands. You can kind of make that work for a lot of different things. And I think that's sort of a strength of Vainglorious Raiders.
Mm.
Um, for warbands that are more inclined to just sit and hold, you definitely have the tools to do that, and you can just kind of take your attacks advantageously whenever you want. And if you don't score those things, they're the lower scoring parts of the deck anyway.
Mm.
Uh, and then on the flip side, if you wanted to play a more aggressive warband, you then just sort of have the hold stuff to try and score sort of coincidentally.
Yep.
So actually, after seeing that, the thing that immediately came to my mind was our discussion about the Grimwatch and how they really like the invasion hold stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And having both Extraordinary Revelation and Fearless Seekers made me think of them. So I immediately thought about them at first, and then decided that I actually like the Skaven better.
Mm.
But I don't think it would really make a big difference which one you chose. I think they both like this deck quite a bit. So thinking that, I then wanted to make sure that, like, well, are the gambits and upgrades going to lend themselves to that? And the gambits absolutely do. They are a lot of really strong things, such as, you know, Swarming Darkness, Step Between Shadows, Dark Inversion is in here, which has sort of become a boogeyman card.
Yeah. The Dark Inversion Swarming Darkness combo is
Yeah,
pretty
it's nasty.
boss. Yeah.
So having access to both of those feels really good. Shadow Lure for an extra push.
Mm.
Like, there's some nice stuff in here. And then for more aggressive pieces, you also have Live for the Fight, which is pretty nice if you just need plus dice. And if you
Yep.
have a brawler, hey, all that much better. Sikkim is another push, so you never can go wrong with that. Kings of the Deep won't necessarily be amazing in all the decks that you would want to do this with, but if you're going more aggro, that can be really gross.
Sure.
So yeah, I was like, wow, okay, so we've got tons of really good gambits. You can kind of do whatever you want here. The thing though that jumped to me immediately is, like, you probably cut some of the more aggressive pieces or some of the push pieces depending on which way you want to lean into this.
Yeah.
But I think that's maybe a nice plus for this deck as well in the Rivals Plus format, is that you can kind of have those small pieces to take out to lean more towards whatever the strength of the warband is.
Mm-hmm.
And then for upgrades, it's a lot of the stuff that cares about cover hexes. So you've got Shadow Spear, Dark Fortitude, Dark Majesty, Nether Defense, Abyssal Summoner, like just lots of stuff that makes you stronger for standing on cover hexes. So
Yeah.
if you're gonna lean into that, you're in pretty good shape, I think, with a lot of this.
And just looking at it now, I mean, some of what jumps out at me as well is that there's 3 different weapon upgrades in here. There's Withering Blade, Penumbral Dirk, and Shadow Spear.
Yeah.
Shadow Spear being the particularly strong one here. But the presence of weapons makes this, and you are already looking at them, but Grimwatch and Spike Claw, for example, these swarm war bands where the little guys could use a little help laying some damage on.
Yeah, well, and things like Penumbral Dirk, which is already pretty accurate just the way it is, but then it also picks up Cleave if you've got multiple upgrades. Withering Blade makes you an assassin, so if you keep in cold blood, it can make that easier. Withering Blade also has Stagger, which is just nice to have. Like, yeah, I think if you've got revivable fighters, a lot of this deck is really kind of scary.
Yeah. Yeah. You talked about some of your standout, like some of the upgrades and gambits specifically that caught your eye. Let's loop around to the objectives again. Which of the objectives in this deck are you like, hey, I'm really glad that like I have this available to me, basically.
Yeah. So I already mentioned that the things that even just like immediately pulled me towards the specific warbands I was interested in is Fearless Seekers and Extraordinary Revelation.
Mm,
Um, very similar. Fearless Seekers is asking you to hold two feature tokens in enemy territory. And then Extraordinary Revelation is also a similar thing, but it has to be objectives, which you can just flip. Like it's not a big deal.
mm.
And those are for 2 glory and 3 glory. So it's like, okay, so that's a big chunk of your glory. I will say the total deck is 19 glory as well if you just run it straight. So there's a lot there. You can definitely cut some of that. It's got some pretty greedy stuff in here too.
Yeah.
The other things that are pretty spicy, especially with revivable fighters, Master the Abyss. So again, it's hold 3 cover hexes, so
Yeah.
it doesn't even have to be feature tokens. You do take a damage when you do that, but if you have revivable fighters, it's not as big of a deal. Also for 2 glory, and then you do have the very spicy Sudden Revelation and Shadow Elimination flip surges,
Right.
which are pretty gross.
Yeah. Sudden Revelation in particular, and
Yes.
then Contest of Equals you have right in there.
Yeah.
That's so good. It's been restricted, so you have some really workable surges, which is often like your first building block for something.
Yeah. And so I mean, especially with Spike Claws, you really have to lean on a lot of these surges. So Contest of Equals is definitely helping you out, both of the flip ones. And then the other surges that you do have, you've got In Cold Blood, which is a kill either from a friendly fighter with no wound counters or a friendly fighter that's an assassin. You, thanks to the errata, you do have one natural assassin in the warband, although stock, he's not probably getting any kills. And then you can then, like I said, you can use the Withering Blade to make another one an assassin as well. And then the other surge that's in the deck is Down with the Ship, which I think this is an almost immediate cut candidate. You have to kill an enemy leader in enemy territory. It is worth 2, but like there's just too many things you need to line up to make this work.
Sure.
So you do have to find a couple more surges. So the deck innately has 5 surges, which is actually, I think, something we saw before in some of these other rival decks. So I'm kind of wondering if they're intentionally leaning you away from surges, which I don't really understand because that's not what you're going to do in Championship. But
well, yeah, that's true. I think they've been doing it a thing to be a little more consistent. Like a lot of the faction rivals decks, they've been releasing with 4 surges lately.
Yeah, they've just been moving away from. I guess because it surges are where a lot of the power comes from in decks, right? So
right.
You don't necessarily want to push lots of power into stuff that doesn't rotate, because then you get problematic cards that you can't get rid of.
Yeah.
Hrothgorn. What? Anyway, so that is actually sort of a knock against using Spike Claw Swarm to do this, because they do not have very many surges. I think they have 2, and they're both kind of bad. One of them is get a kill with your leader, and the other one is at arm's length, which is have somebody taken out of action while they are not adjacent to a friendly fighter.
Yeah.
So there's some tricks you can do to make that happen, but it's not always the easiest.
Right.
But I think it's still better than Down with the Ship.
Yeah. That's a lot of the especially those early war bands which were the season 1 war bands, they were pretty light on surges in general. And so that's a thing that they're looking at pretty quick on those.
Absolutely. But yeah, so that is just a rundown of the Vainglorious Raiders and some of the reasoning for why certain warbands would be good for them. Like I said, I think other warbands can work. I actually looked at Crushes for a hot minute. You would have to make a lot more changes though to make it work. Um, Hrothgorn is actually a possibility here as well.
Mm.
But again, like you don't necessarily want to be throwing your Noblars forward to try and hold an enemy territory. Like that's sort of eventually what
Yeah, it's
turned me
pretty
away
tough.
from doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, some of the Stormcasts could work here too. I like you just kind of have a lot of options. It's a pretty flexible card pool, I think. But overall, I think having revivable fighters makes the Fearless Seekers and Extraordinary Revelation work, and those
Mm.
are the really big scorers. And
Hmm.
if you can reliably pick those up, I think the deck is going to work out pretty well for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is strong in my
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah,
my
yeah,
estimation. Like I think this is strong enough that it you think about taking this um, uh, instead of essentials. You know, essentials is generally considered kind of the default choice if
yeah,
you're. And there's a whole conversation there about whether that's a good thing or bad thing for the format.
yeah,
But
for
this one
sure.
comes with a strong enough set of surges that for some war bands, like yeah, like I'll forgive the losing access to great strength in exchange for getting these hot surges, you know, to get
Yeah,
there.
yeah, for sure. And if you're playing a warband specifically that doesn't care about having +1 damage, then
Hmm.
um, I think it's definitely a reason to look at this instead.
Yeah. Yep. Or they've got right, or they might have it in house, you know,
Sure.
somewhere
Yeah.
as
I
well.
mean, I guess if you already have it, you're like, hey, I don't need 4 plus damage upgrades. Oh, maybe you do. I don't know.
Yeah.
Cool.
Many do.
Yeah. Unfortunately, maybe. I don't know. I guess that's your own take on the game.
Sure.
Uh yeah. So then you took a look at the other one. So this is the Patient Lurkers deck.
Right.
Uh I guess run us down. You probably went through a pretty similar process.
I did. So first is kind of get a sense for overall what it wants to do, and it's a little bit in the name. I think what they're trying to get you to do is this is a deck for warbands that might want to hang back. There's very little in here that encourages you to go into enemy territory.
Mhm.
So if you, I think they're saying like, hey, if you think you want to just kind of lay back in the cut, make the enemy come to you, then this might be the deck you go for.
Yeah.
Um, so with that in mind, and some of the cards that make me say that, you know, they've got well, again, importantly, that there's nothing that tells you to get into enemy territory by and large. Um, there's some hold things like Lost in Shadow. There's hold more, like Sinking Feeling. I mean, I guess
Mm.
I'll run down it real quick. The objectives are contest to equals, inseparable, lead from the rear, looming threat, Lost in Shadow, Sinking Feeling, unequal contest, chum the waters, ferret them out, lost leader, lucky find, and lured in. Um, the the real big problem that jumps out at you with this is that there are only 3 surges here. One of
Yeah.
them is great. Contest to equals is excellent. Uh, Unequal contest is situationally good. There's some warbands that do well with this, although it's more challenging in the Rivals Plus or
Yeah.
Rivals format where you don't have as much support for rerolls or whatever. And the only other surge in here is Lured In. And this is score this immediately after an enemy fighter on an objective token in your territory is taken out of action.
Yeah, it's
If this
so
said
bad.
if this said on a feature token, I think this would be workable in this format because people are trying to get on those.
Yeah,
Uh, it is so hard to make sure that somebody's on an objective token. It is nuts. Um,
it is very very difficult. Like
yeah, this might
penumbral lock is basically the only way to do it.
yeah this might come back around again if we move out of the realm of shadow and objectives are
Yeah.
not as easy to flip, or delve is no longer a thing. But this deck effectively has 2 surges, and so one of the very first things you have to do to look at if this is something you want to mix in for Rivals Plus is are there effective surges in your faction deck that you can mix in. And so this is, if you're going straight rivals, this is tough sledding. You have
Yeah, I
not
think I'd
much to help you out here.
I think I'd go so far as to say probably don't touch for straight rivals.
uh, these objectives add up to 15 glory. There's a little bit of help in the um, upgrades, including one of the
Yeah.
very few that ask you to be in enemy territory, which is waterlogged map. There's a thing that makes me think that we have an errata coming, or maybe somebody just missed something, and that is that they
Yeah.
have lucky find. Score this in an end phase if one or more friendly fighters each have one or more map upgrades. Map being a bolded term.
Yeah.
Waterlogged map is not listed as a map upgrade. Like, it
Yeah,
doesn't have
cuz
that term.
it's not one of the map piece
Yeah,
upgrades, and I have to think that that was a mistake where
yeah,
they just saw a map in the name and were like, "Well, of course it works."
yeah.
And
So
that's not at all how it works.
that's an objective that just won't score with this deck. If you're playing it straight out, actually won't score anyway because you're playing Rivals Plus. You don't
Yeah,
have
there's no way
access
to
to that.
include it.
Yeah, so that is effectively a null card there. Um, and then there's a lot of like one glory end phases in there. Chum the Waters is a nice one, and you also
Yep.
get some help with that down the line. And so basically, when I was looking at this and the objectives are like, well, contest to equals, everybody can do that. Unequal contest, you're going to be looking. You're probably going to want a warband that has a chance to score that because you're going to rely really heavily on their faction surges, and so you're probably already scraping the bottom of the barrel there. So you're going to have to take this. You're going to want it,
Yeah.
um, and so you're going to want to be looking for a warband that has rerolls or is going to make a lot of the faces of the attack die be successes. Or even this is actually a decent card for Rippas because they'll throw those one
Yeah,
smash bite attacks, uh, get them through and land them that way.
definitely.
Um, but yeah, the objective deck is not great. There's a couple decent ones in there, but so I see it. I'm looking like we want a warband. I think that if you're going for the stuff that's good, you maybe want to be able to get supports. You maybe want to be holding things. You want to be able to kind of be passive in the back. It gets a little better in the power deck. We have Dark Epiphany, Leech Strength, Live for the Fight, Shadow Lure, Unfair Fight, Wetted Blade, Suffocating Mist, Step Between Shadows, In Too Deep, Creaking Ceiling. And then for the gambits, Shadow Lure is in there for a push. Step Between Shadows is you can swap between cover hexes, so you could theoretically use it to get from a gloom onto a objective that needs to be that you could then delve. If you're on one of your own shadows, it's a
Hmm.
little rough that there's not more push tech in here for somebody who's hopefully standing on things. Um, but there's some decent stuff. And back to the support sort of theme, Unfair Fight is a pretty decent card if you're doing supports.
Hmm.
Um, that's a pretty good effect. Wetted Blades for some accuracy because there's a reroll there that can help you pull off unequal contest. Um, and then something like Leech Strength. If I got little guys, I can actually get some pretty big boosts of damage potentially. So that's not too shabby. And then Suffocating Mist is going to help you score that Chum the Waters, and it's a generally good card in this.
Yeah.
Um, so, I think there's some sort of clunkers like In Too Deep prevents people from people cannot be on guard until the end of the phase. Enemies cannot be in guard in your territory until the end of the phase. That's shockingly situational.
Hmm. Yeah.
um, Creaking Ceiling is a weird one because if you drive people back into but it works against you. This is a extra damage if you drive people into an edge or next to a blocked hex. I guess being able to cheat in some extra damage on the fly is not too bad. Um, and
Yeah.
it stays until the end of the round or until another domain is played. You're probably not going to see many domains in Rivals Plus. So
I don't think there are any others in any of the rivals decks.
Yeah. I mean, for me, playing very conservatively, I probably play this like last activation and just treat it as a, hey, I've got a chance to get an extra damage on this attack or something. And
Yeah.
then not have to worry about it against myself. But, situationally may do it more.
Yeah. It just doesn't feel like it fits, right? I mean, like,
Mm,
I feel like this card is good, but it like you really need to be pretty aggressive to use it, I feel
yeah.
like, and
Yeah.
this is not that. So
Yeah.
sort of a weird inclusion here.
Yeah. There's some decent upgrades here. So they are Bloodrack Mask, Encrusted Key, Phantom Spear, Waterlogged Map, Abyssal Summoner, Cursed Cutlass, Dark Fortitude, Dark Intellect, Dark Strength, and Ferocious Bite.
Hmm.
So there's some stuff that's making you say like, hey, maybe I kind of want range 1 because that's where Dark Strength and Ferocious Bite will come in.
Yeah.
Dark Strength giving a damage boost, Ferocious Bite giving an accuracy boost, but they both have to be range 1, which can be a little tricky. You can, if you need some help getting some range 1, there is that Cursed Cutlass, which is a 4 Fury 2 damage. It's not terrible.
Yeah, no. It's a decent
So,
weapon. It's just
yeah.
You don't want that to be your only option here.
Yeah. And I do like Phantom Spear, especially in Rivals Plus. Like
Yes.
Cleave 2 Smash, 2 damage, range 2, especially the range 2 can really kind of be good. And then again, in this theme of maybe holding back, sitting on stuff, that's a pretty okay thing to do because you can stand on objective and poke away.
Yeah.
And Dark Fortitude giving you some healing is pretty good. Waterlogged Map, that's the only thing that's trying to get you to go into enemy territory. So
Yep.
that's kind of the take there. So looking at those, I'll do a side note of here's how I went about doing this. And again, I kind of focused a little more on Rivals Plus. As I built this deck, you do it in the deck builder, your choice, but built the Rivals deck, laid it out, loaded it in, and then one by one went through and just looked at all the faction icons and said, okay, let me start at the top. Do I think Steelhearts wants anything to do this? No, I do not. Let's move right along. And went through and just had a gut impulse of like, do I think this warband might be interesting? Let's take a look. And so if I thought they might have something to do, then I'd like show me the faction cards for that warband. And so I'd be looking at the faction cards right alongside these. And so I could, do the first thing. Hey, are there force surges that I think I could get away with? No, and as is the case with a lot of Shadespire, like
Yeah.
I did for a hot second consider Spike Claw, and then I was like, oh my god, I would have a deck with 4 surges.
It'd be rough.
I guess.
And some not amazing end phase.
Yeah, no, it's not. Even though there might be some things that it likes about that, I don't think that's going to be functional. And so march right along. I did actually think about Grimwatch here because Grimwatch brings a number of okay surges that can get you by. It felt a little rough even in that, but I was like, that might be doable. But it didn't quite click together for me. One that I did though, kind of like was Grashrack's Despoilers. And there's a few things here. They want to hold. They have some good things to help them hold. They actually have quite a few decent surges, although it does still get a little hairy in there. Unequal Contest is helped by the fact that you have those ritual counters that provide rerolls as long as you're killing things. So you have a chance of getting your way to those. They don't mind having a few weapons in the back there. So I kind of built it out. It seemed functional. I think that a question you end up having to ask yourself afterwards though is like, would I, like if I was committed to taking Grashrack's Despoilers to a Rivals Plus event, and I decided, am I deciding I'm taking Patient Lurkers because it could work? Or is there another deck that might actually just work better for these guys? So
yeah. I think that's a fair question and probably a fair criticism of Patient Lurkers because I think you can almost always do a little bit better if you just went with something else.
Yeah, like I don't know, Vainglorious Raiders. So
Yeah. Uh, Even if you wanted to just stand in the back and hold, I think you'd do better with some of the stuff
Vainglorious
from
Raiders,
Vainglorious
you
Raiders.
might, yeah. Um, but it seemed okay. And then the other thing that I thought was I put together another one was the Cunnin crew.
Yeah.
They do have some builds that are I'm going to sit here and hold, and they can get by. They can get around some of the push issues with their extra movement tricks, but
Yeah.
um, not having. I mean, they really love the pushes to set up things, and so only having the one in Shadow Lure is a big problem. But they don't mind unfair fight. They're going to be doing some supporting. Um, range one is actually a little tough to come by in that warband.
That is true.
You've got Gicket and you've got Crookshank, and Crookshank is always just off doing whatever he does.
You
So
mean stabbing me in the face?
he had a little bit of hero stuff in some of my games this weekend too. It's not great when you're having to do work with Crookshank, but yeah. Um, and so I put something together for that. But then again, it was the same sort of situation. Like I think there might just be a better build with a different deck. But if you're committed, those were the two that I kind of assembled something with and how they came together.
Nice. Shall we run down the decks that we actually built and
Sure.
sort of talk through why the certain cuts and sort of where we ended up?
Yeah. Why don't we go back to you? I've been chatting for a while. So
Yeah, sure. So we can include these deck lists on the episode notes so folks can pull them up and sort of look along as you listen or check them out after you're done. But so as I mentioned when I was talking about how I approach this for Spike Claws, the hold objective stuff immediately seems like it works pretty well because you have these rats that you can bring back over and over again, and you can bring them back in enemy territory, and that is the most important part. If you can pop somebody up right next to an objective, you can pretty easily get them back on for Fearless Seekers and Extraordinary Revelation. So that's sort of the core of the deck. That's where I'm starting from. Master the Abyss continues to help with that in that we're still holding. It's just 3 cover hexes. Shadow Elimination and Sudden Revelation also work with that because you're just flipping the tokens you're already on. So about half the deck already is just doing what we want to do. And then in Cold Blood and Contest of Equals, we can make some sort of just situational attacks and probably pick those up at some point between upgrades and the innate assassin of Festering Skaven, I believe it is. Lurking Skaven.
Lurking, yeah.
So those are fairly straightforward, although not amazing. And then we kind of get stuck because there's really not good end phases for Skaven in their core deck. So what we get stuck with from the deck is Shifting Walls, which maybe wouldn't be impossible. This is sort of a weird one. We haven't seen anything like this in a while. This is an end phase that you score if there are no edge hexes that are occupied and there are no fighters adjacent to blocked hexes.
Big oof.
Big oof. You've definitely got to play a board that helps you to try and do this and hope that your opponent does as well. But you got a few pushes in the deck to try and help with that that I'll mention here in a little while. So it's not impossible, but it's certainly difficult.
Sure.
Although we definitely played Alone in the Dark a lot back in the day, and that one on paper looked worse than it actually was too.
I think a best of one, you may actually get away with this one a little bit.
Yeah, so. I think in a best of one, and I think a lot of times Rivals Plus tends to be best of one. I think Shifting Walls will just catch people off guard. Yeah. They just won't be thinking about it, and then, hey, I scored 2 glory.
Yeah.
So that left 3 slots, 2 of which were Surges, 1 which is an end phase to try and fill in from the Skaven ones. So I already mentioned that for Surges, really the only 2 playables that you have are Scritch is the Greatest, yes, which is get a kill with your leader. Not ideal, but not horrible either. He is pretty decent at killing folks with a range 2 pretty decent attack. And then arm's length is just getting somebody to die while they're not adjacent to any of your fighters. And you have a number of range 2 attacks already, and then you've got the Shadow Spear upgrade, which is also a range 2 attack. So
Sure.
just making a few pokes here and there, I think you can pick these up. And then the last one is Brilliant. I just figured, so this is one that you score in an end phase if you scored 2 or more other objective cards in the preceding action phase. So you don't have a ton of reliable surges, but the ones that are reliable are very reliable. So you have Sudden Revelation, Shadow Elimination, and Contest of Equals. And I think that if you can get one of those and then stretch to get something else, you can probably pick up Brilliant. Although I still don't know that it's if it's like guaranteed to happen, but you can at least try to make it happen and have some consistency there.
Sure.
And so leaning into that strategy, we're keeping in the gambits Swarming Darkness, Step Between Shadows, Dark Inversion, which none of those should be a surprise. And in fact, Swarming Darkness and Step Between Shadows are both choose as well. So we'll be able to inspire off of those, which is kind of spicy. Then we've got Sikkim, which in this deck will just be a sidestep, which there's nothing wrong with that. Shadow Lure, which is likely to just be a sidestep, but sometimes the ability to move a empty feature hex will also be important.
Especially with Skaven, because you move it onto a starting hex.
Yep.
And all of a sudden
revive right on top of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, it's sidestep, so it's an inspire if you need it. But that push for the hex is also very good. And then the only other one that I kept from the deck is Elite Advance. Partially because once you're on the hexes, being able to be put on guard without an action is useful for not getting pushed off. But then also, as a choose, it will also inspire a Skaven.
Yeah.
So some pretty good options for inspiration. And then that leaves 4 slots open for stuff from your faction deck. To do that, I think the place you always start is There Are Always More. Gives you a power card to revive one of your expendable rats. Then you have Scratching in the Shadows, so you can just run Distraction, which is always good. Nervous Scrabbling, which lets you play Confusion without running Confusion. And then Aversion to Death, which is that when one of your fighters dies, you can push 2 friendly fighters 1 hex, which is probably going to happen. And a double push is quite good. So you have Aversion to Death, Nervous Scrabbling, which is not a push, but it's like a push, Scratching in the Shadows, Shadow Lure, Sikkim, and Swarming Darkness, all for stuff to push things around on the board. So you're in pretty good shape there. And then you also have Dark Inversion, which is really nasty for holding, and Step Between Shadows to teleport your rats around. So I think the gambits are really strong here. And then to finish things off, we pretty much just have some support pieces and upgrades. We're just trying to sort of make the rats a little bit more lethal because we can't stack a ton of defensive stuff. For the pieces that are defensive, you have Nether Defense, which is just +1 defense in cover, which is really solid on rats who inspire to 2 dodge anyway. Dark Majesty, which will reduce damage if fighters are adjacent to you while you're in a cover hex, which is also pretty solid. And then Abyssal Summoning. Nope, that one's just on your attacks. I thought it was all attacks. So you pretty much just have like 2 ways to increase your defense. Those are probably going on Scritch. Then you've got Shadow Spear to increase damage and range. Abyssal Summoner give you support on attacks. Withering Blade makes you both an assassin and just as a decent attack. Penumbral Dirk, also just a decent attack. And then I included 4 things from their faction upgrades, which this was probably the hardest choice for me. I wasn't 100% sure I wanted to run all 4 of these, but I figured I'd just go with it because they seemed like they could be decent. Sneaky stab stab. So before you make an attack, you get to push the fighter with this upgrade 1 hex, which
Yeah.
is sort of weird. I'm not like, because you could be out of range, so you don't have
Well,
any legal targets, and then you get to push into range.
I don't think it necessarily. I think you can't
You
declare the
can't
attack
declare
unless
the
you're.
attack. Okay, I
Yeah.
wasn't sure if that was gonna work or not. So,
Yeah.
and that's sort of this weird old templating. So that's definitely something to keep in mind if you're playing any of these old war bands. Maybe
Yeah.
sometimes you gotta double check how the cards work. But
But it's a way, especially if you got some between the Phantom Spear or Scritch, you can do some extra
yeah,
positioning tricks with
yeah,
it.
push away, push onto a hex before you attack. Uh, there's a number of different sneaky things you can do with this.
Yeah.
Probably why it's called what it's called. Then festering blades, because Grievous with +2 damage is never a bad thing.
Oh man,
Um,
yeah. Think about giving that guy the Shadow Spear, right? Just
yeah, right.
tossing 3 smash.
Three
And just,
smash to go to 4 damage if you roll a
yeah.
crit. Mm.
Oof. Mm.
And festering is no joke all of a sudden. Then you've got expendable, because of course you do. And black hunger, because I think that giving the hungerings Skaven the ability to turn into a blender if you need to is probably a decent option.
Never not good.
Um, Never not good. And if you give him something like Withering Blade or the Penumbral Dirk, this can be pretty nasty.
Mm.
3 Fury, 3 damage is already good. 3 Fury, 3 damage with Cleave would be better, because by the time you have Penumbral Dirk and Black Hunger, that's what you'll have. And then Withering Blade has stagger on it as well, so then any hits that don't get kills will also stagger,
Mm.
which is probably pretty good when you're hitting multiple opponents. So you sort of get this weird mix of both aggro and positioning, but I think it kind of works because the rats can be tooled up and then keep getting brought back with their tools.
Yeah. Yeah. That feels pretty good for a Rivals Plus.
Yeah. When I got done with it, I was like, I think this has legs. I think this could go the distance in a Rivals Plus tournament if you really wanted to go with the rats.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just talked a whole bunch about a deck from start to finish. How did you do building yours?
Not as good as you did.
Well, you had a worse starting spot, that is for sure.
I'll talk about the version that I did with Despoilers because I had a little bit more fun with that.
Sure.
We already talked about the Surge situation. So I took unequal contest and contest to equals and pretended lured in didn't exist. That left me looking for 4 Surges from the Despoilers, and there were a couple. So there's Despoilers itself, which is their temporary victory, the hold 3, score
Mhm.
2.
Yep.
There's Bestial Cunning, and that's third gambit in a single round. That's pretty solid.
Mhm.
And then I landed on Killing Blow, which is basically one-shot somebody. And
Yeah.
Stampede was a little tougher to get to, but that is a third or subsequent friendly charge. And that's not terrible because they got a couple ranged fighters. So there's
Yeah.
it gets a little more difficult later on when you start losing more people, but it's certainly easier than it is to do with Garrick's Reavers, who can sometimes end up with 2 people too far away to be able to do it. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I guess the only caveat is that they fixed the templating compared to Reavers, where you could have charged 3 times earlier in the round and then draw into it.
that's true. Yeah. Um, so that felt okay on the Surges. Like
Yeah.
that can work. Lost in Shadow because we're going to try and stand on stuff. So that's
Yep.
something we pull from the Rivals deck. Sinking Feeling as well because it's just standing on feature tokens. We're already doing that, so that gives you something to do. Chum the Waters for sure. You can be you
Mhm.
maybe pinging people with bow shots, and we'll raises it up. And it really started to run out of some steam here. I do like not survival. I like survival of the fittest with this warband. It's
Mhm.
5 fighters are out of action, and you at least have somebody surviving. So it's
Yeah,
like Corn Care is not just oh so slightly harder.
just
If
slightly
you
more fair.
yeah, if you don't have anyone alive, you're probably losing the game anyway. So well, with these guys,
Yeah.
Reavers might be a different story. Um, and then I ended up with proven superiority. This is the kill the enemy leader and have enemy leader is dead and yours is alive. It was mostly just to try to keep the ceiling up, and you can try to kind of kamikaze into the enemy leader with some of your guys if you need to. Um,
Yeah.
and then I was getting desperate, so ferret them out came in, and this is it's an end phase. Either kill an assassin or one or more enemy fighters are taken out of action in your territory this round. Feels like people are probably going to come to you to get you off of things, so it didn't feel terrible. It's just not
Yeah.
a great one. So got to the end of the objective deck. It's like I think I got something here. It's all right. So um, brought me onto the gambits. Suffocating Mist went straight in there, try to help out with Chum the
Absolutely.
Waters, help out with some of the lower damage things. Wetted Blades also in there. This is reroll one attack dice in the first range 1 or 2, or give it cleave. If you happen to be an assassin, which I don't think happens with this warband, I can't remember any upgrades that turn anyone to an assassin. Um, but
I don't think so.
but the reroll is going to help with your unequal contest, a little bit of accuracy, so
Yep.
fine. Shadow Lure is our only push from the faction deck. Live for the Fight. They do have accuracy problems, especially early on, so
Mm-hmm.
can toss that in. And then the Step Between Shadows, I think that's going to be kind of situational, but you may be able to use it to get one of your little guys kind of out of danger. Have them as they're getting threatened in like round 2 or 3, teleport to the back of the enemy
Yeah.
board and hold something there instead.
It's
So
really where the lack of pushes starts to show here is that like you've even
yeah,
got a power card that wants you to have a push so you can
yeah,
set it up, and it's like, oh man, you just don't have it.
yeah. Well, speaking of pushes, definitely took Vile Invaders. This is choose up to 2 friendly hunters and
Yep.
push them up to 2 hexes each. That
Have to.
is gotta. That was the number one. It left 3 others. I ended up taking Bull Charge, which gives an innate fury, mostly because I'm kind of like, uh, so on a charge, I actually get an innate fury. It can make some of those like crappy bow attacks actually fairly accurate.
Yeah.
So you get 1 success right away, and then if you can sneak another one in or make it a crit and a success, that's pretty cool. That's more because I like it's so rare that you get to use a card that gives you an innate that I included in there. I don't know if it's the best, but Blood Taunt is damage yourself, get a guard token, which is always a weird one to me, but get a guard token and
Mm-hmm.
then +2 dice in your first attack. So that's a great accuracy bonus. And then Baying Hatred is just a +1 damage to your first range 1 or 2, a little damage boost. The only other thing I would think of is they've got a in-faction enemy push if you're damaged and somebody's adjacent. Is pretty situational.
Yeah.
But you can, if you have enough damage counters, you can really shove someone far. I think you might consider it just because you're so light on any pushes at all. So that would be the one change out I might do.
Yeah.
This is one of those Gambit decks that I look at once I've gotten. I'm like, yeah, that looks good. But then when I look at it in the context of what I'm trying to do, it looks less good.
Yeah.
And this is a big thing with deck building, right? Like if you just include cards because they're good, you'll have some good cards, but you might not have a great deck.
Absolutely.
And I think this is an example of that. So things didn't get all that better with upgrades. I did find a damage boost with Blood Crazed. So this is kind of a weird one. You have +1 damage to your range 1 or 2. It's basically great strength if you're wounded or happen to be standing next to somebody who's wounded, whether it's a friendly or a. So that is situational-ish, but you can make that happen. You've got Blood Taunt if you want to make it happen to yourself and all that. I took Heedless of Pain for extra wounds. Trophy Taker. I guess the upgrades is where it really kind of breaks down for the Despoilers because they don't have all that many good ones, and they were subjected to that time when it was still happening, where you'd have a lot of fighters in the warband would get fighter specific upgrades.
Very much
Um,
so. Yeah.
and if everyone has to get their own fighter specific upgrade, and you've got a lot of little crappy fighters, then a lot of your upgrade slots in your
Yeah.
faction deck get burned by, like, oh, cool, Gnarl has a special knife or whatever, you know. Uh,
Yeah, I'm seeing a jabbing spear here, +1
yeah,
range to a short
yeah,
spear attack.
yeah. Get that spear up to range too, boy. Yeah, there's some rough stuff there. So this is where I went fairly heavy back into the faction deck.
Mhm.
Um, one one curious thing about these guys is, I see them. And I remember playing them before. I was like, yeah, you got two bow guys there. Both those guys actually have a built-in range one attack. So
Yeah.
the the range one stuff is a universal card for this. So that's Ferocious Bite and Dark Strength. Um,
Mhm.
are pretty handy. Um, Dark Fortitude is not too shabby for trying to keep your bigger, important guys alive. Um, Cursed Cutlass, sure, I'll take it for some better accuracy on the little guys, a little harder hit. Abyssal Summoner is a accuracy upgrade. This is get a supporting fighter if you're attacking. From a cover hex, and it's not restricted for range. So those bows can get you a little closer to unequal contest as well. I think Phantom Spear is an easy pickup for this. And then Encrusted Key, just try and bump your glory ceiling a little higher. So
Mhm.
it was one of these where I got done. I was like, yeah, I think I got something I could play. And then I listened to you talk through the deck you built, and I was like, oh God, this is nothing.
Uh, yeah,
So
well, the I think we've thoroughly shown why Vainglorious Raiders is potentially the new sort of standard in
yeah,
Rivals Plus.
yeah. But if we reach it back uh, to the reasons these exist, or some of the reasons they may have come out with them like this. I mean, this is, if this is a Rivals deck that is not great, that is probably not going to see much use in Rivals or Rivals Plus. Uh, that's okay. It was just a list that they printed on
Yeah.
White Dwarf. It's not a package they built of the cards. So, um, and if they kind of learn from it, or there's always a chance that we're wrong and it's better than it looks.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe there's
Uh,
some warband that
yeah.
like, hey, actually, if you
What?
run,
Well, I just had a if we need a real goofy event or something, like if we get done doing our leagues or something, need an in between thing, we'll have a week where uh, the week before, everyone like spins a big wheel to see what warband you're bringing, and then you
oh
also
yeah,
spin
nice.
then you
Okay.
spin a smaller wheel to see which Rivals Plus addendum you can use. So,
Ooh,
like,
that
you
could
could
be
end up
pretty
like,
fun.
yeah, oh no, I'm Curse Breakers, and I'm bringing Patient Lurkers or something like.
Yeah.
Let's see what I can do. I think that would be just a fun one-off throwaway. So I'll put that out into
Yeah,
the
real
world.
real challenge there. That could
Yeah,
be fun. Jot that down. Um, but yeah, I mean, like you say, there's no real lost resources here. I mean, they spent a little bit of ink to print this into a White Dwarf, but
yeah,
it'll live digitally as well. And like if they're like, whoa, this is a real big mess up, they can just scrub it completely and be like, hey, actually, let's just replace that and not have it exist because it doesn't serve a purpose.
sure,
But I mean, I think if you have a warband that's faction cards are really solid and you're just like, I just need, one or two additional tools, maybe this is what you need, because like Ferocious Bite is super gross if you just need some plus dice on an upgrade, or like uh I mean, Phantom Spear is really solid. You know, there's just a couple things in here that individually are strong cards. So,
sure,
maybe this is more of like a, hey, I just need like one or two things to fill out an
Hmm.
existing strong list of cards, then
Hmm.
maybe this does that for you. I don't
Yeah.
necessarily know, but like Chum the Waters is really solid. So maybe you're just like, hey, I just want Chum the Waters really bad,
Yeah.
and you just make the rest of it work.
Yeah. I wonder. I'm trying to remember if I looked at Dread Pageant. Now my brain is thinking like maybe. I mean, because Dread Pageant is an example of a
Yeah.
warband which has some pretty tremendous in faction cards, and they don't mind doing that holdback thing.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Might have to
Um,
reattack it with that.
yeah, I think they could be all right in this. I think
Yeah. They don't mind suffocating mist help for that inspire too. Yeah.
no,
Oh
absolutely
man,
not.
here I go. Here I go.
There you go. More excuses to play Dread Pageant. Although
Yeah.
you like never get to play them because Brian's always playing them.
Stupid Brian squad manipulated.
Although there aren't any rules against you playing them and
No,
Brian
no,
playing
no.
them.
I should. Yeah. After getting my teeth kicked in over the weekend, I was like, man, I wish maybe I should get good. Maybe I should get good. Period. But maybe I should get good with Dread Pageant. Try them out. So
Says the guy who
learn thing.
came in like third at Adepticon or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and this is the thing I'll say is that going through this kind of list building exercise, like, you know, people will do this with art, and I'm not trying to draw. I am trying to draw this, but I'm not. It sounds like a ridiculous parallel to talk about, you know, making art and building a deck that you may or may not end up using. But changing the constraints, you know, like writers or artists will do this. They'll say like, okay, like I'm gonna alter the constraints on what I can do. Like I'm gonna make myself make this piece of fiction shorter than normal, or you know, I'm gonna paint, but I'm gonna use a medium that I don't often use, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there's value in that, in getting, you know, better, learning more about building decks, just going through this process of saying, okay, I'm constrained in this different way. Um, how does that change how I think about decks? And so I found it valuable for that. So I'd encourage people to give it a shot. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
just for that.
I think that's in and of itself that is a benefit of the rivals formats.
Yeah.
Less so regular rivals because I guess you're not really doing any sort of deck building, but
Right.
uh, limitations force adaptation, right?
Yep.
Uh,
Mm,
whatever
that
sort
is,
of
wow. I wish I'd had that phrase instead of the random fumbling I did instead.
I think that's actually some phrase that was something I picked up from anthropology courses in
Okay.
college. It's like, you see people do like really weird stuff when they are having to live in a really extreme conditions, and it's
Mm,
because you have to adapt, uh,
mm,
and otherwise you'll die. Which, of course, in a game is much less extreme. But the point stands that like when you put those limits in place, and you don't have the option to just take an easier route, you then get creative and you make things work. Which can be really cool and rewarding in a game because it's like, hey, I can really like stretch myself. I can see how far can I go with how like way less than I normally would work with.
mm.
That can be really rewarding. It can also be really hard. So, um, maybe as a once in a while thing, just to test out, could be useful. I think
Sure.
this is maybe a good way to like, if you feel like you're already really solid in a warband and you're like, I want another challenge with them. I want to like
Mm,
push to that next level with just the tactics of the warband. It's like, okay,
yeah.
let's set the limiter and say, okay, I can't play with all these, really solid cards I usually do. Well, here's a good way to try that out.
Sure.
And if you still can do really well with them, then it's like, hey, maybe you've got something going on that other people aren't aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All of that being said, I think while the balance between these two decks is obviously not the same, I think having the two decks in the format is now a good thing. I would like to see them continue to add more variety.
Mm,
And I actually really enjoy the Rivals Plus format. I think having both Championship and Rivals Plus is really good.
hmm.
Um, and I would love to see it continue to be its own like standalone competitive format. Um,
Sure.
I think It is healthy for the game to have that outlet, and I think that it gives a different avenue because there's going to be times, as happens a lot of the time in this game, towards the end of seasons where it feels like everything's kind of been solved, so to speak.
Mm,
Um, where having another format could be a nice way to change things up and have something new to do that is like not just waiting around for more cards.
definitely.
Any final thoughts for you? Otherwise, I think we pretty well covered it.
Yeah, I think after this, I'm going to go try and give a listen to that Battle Mallet and
Ooh,
just compare our take with theirs.
good
So
points. I
yeah,
think that is a thing to put on the playlist for tomorrow.
yeah,
All right.
uh, yeah. I think that's it. What I got.
Sweet. Okay. Well, uh, if you have enjoyed this, if you think we made any sort of egregious errors in our evaluations, or if you just want to let us know what you think of the episode, you can always reach us at WTHcast on Twitter or whatthehexcast at gmail.com. You can find all of our content and all the other content that in the AOS sphere over on themortalrealms.com. They are our sort of larger affiliate podcasting group. And
Mm,
they've got a lot of really cool content. They're doing a whole bunch of stuff. Uh, so if you're into any other format of game that in the Age of Sigmar sphere, go check them out. They got lots of cool stuff.
yeah,
Um,
I know Dogs of Warcry are trying to figure out exactly. They're fine tuning what their coverage of the new Warcry box is going to be. So
yeah. After we
watch for
got to
that.
see those sweet new
Yeah,
guys posted,
yeah. Sweet new terrain, man.
oh my goodness, yeah,
Yeah,
those boxes are so great.
yeah,
But it always lures me into spending way too much money because they're like seriously like $200.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, if you so if you're a Warcry player, go check them out because they do a much better job talking about this stuff than we do. Uh, Coming up next, we've got a few options.
Mm,
Obviously, there is, as we mentioned, we just were teased about a new warband, and so maybe get more information about them soon? Question mark. Kind of unknown at this point. They didn't give any sort of timelines, but they should be sometime this quarter, so within the next 2 months. Yeah, we'll definitely have something. We're not sure what it's going to be yet, but it'll be something. Um, so should be good.
yeah, we even had somebody request ask when are you covering the Harrow Deep set of short stories or
Oh
set of
yeah, yeah,
novellas or
yeah.
something like that. So
Well, I
yeah,
haven't read them yet, but I mean, we definitely should.
yeah,
Um,
I
the
have.
last set of short stories were
It was
great.
actually yeah. This is a little different, but I think it's still worth your time to read. So if
Yeah.
you
Oh yeah,
get read
you
through, then
did
maybe we'll
read
do
those.
it.
That was a while ago.
Yep, yep, yep.
All right. Well, I think that brings us to our new standing outro segment, which I did not prepare a flavor text for you. Did you prepare one for me?
Oh, I did. I wasn't saying anything because I'm gonna make you ask me for it. So,
Okay. Yeah. Sounds
all
good.
right. Uh, I'm gonna keep the hint relatively vague this time. This
Okay.
is a card whose name has been mentioned in this episode,
Sure.
which you probably could have predicted.
I
So
mean,
here's the quote: "Perfect. Skulk and crouched simultaneously."
uh, it's funny that you mentioned that because I know what this one is exactly. This is Lost Leader.
Yes, yeah, I thought you would. Yeah. All right.
uh, uh, I've been playing with this card recently,
Yeah. Yeah.
and surprisingly has worked out quite well. But
Yeah.
that's another hint for the deck that I'm building. That's a good one. I actually really love the art and the comment on that card.
Yeah.
It's a good one. Very Skaven.
Yep. Your recommended listening for this episode is a song called White Lies, and it's by the band New Rivals.
Mm,
Uh, so go check that out.
there you go.
And that's what I got for you.
Yeah. For What the Hex, I've been Phil.
And I've been Davy. I'm gonna tell you when they release. I already know.
Oh, okay. Okay,
They're
cool.
they're gonna release when I am on our family trip in
Oh,
Alaska and
okay.
unable to record.
Yes.
Uh, no, I don't actually know that. I'm calling the inconvenience.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Gotcha.
because
Well,
we'll have to record something kind of a little far in advance for that, and so we'll end up releasing something that'll be like, here's the background on all the war bands, and everyone's gonna be like, what are you doing? Like this would tell
it's
us
just
about Hexbane
released.
Hunters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be of course it would work out that way.
Yeah.
Uh but yeah, so
Maybe you can work on your impression of me, and you can just do, like
yes,
you.
I'll do both our parts as one person and it'll be great.
Perfect.
No one will notice.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, so I mean we've got sort of a or well, I guess I have a weird deck that we can talk about. There's
Yeah.
potential new releases.
Mm.